Honorable Finance Minister, honored guests, all the international and local, our own experts who have been assembled here today by Dawn. And it's a great effort. It's very well organized, and there's a huge amount of expertise here, which I have to admit, right in the beginning, I lack comprehensively when it comes to the technicalities of climate or what our most recent planning is. So if periodically here and there I put my foot in my mouth, I would seek your tolerance. Now, I'm going to try and look at some ways where Pakistan can galvanize our progress towards the target of achieving 50% reduction. Pakistan has a framework of public sector entities, agencies, at the federal level and at the provincial level, and they're getting ready with policies, but to create a process where we can produce a stream of projects going forward, which is the only way we'll get any toehold in the huge market for credits, carbon credits, which is a supplementary source of finance, but an important source of finance for companies in the Western world and for developing countries generating their own carbon. If you're going to get any such position where we're generating a lot from our own with our own initiatives, then it's got to be a stream of projects coming through from the private sector and the communities, local communities. Local government would be a big help. We'd need stronger local government than we have, but that's the agency that's been mobilized commonly in countries like Indonesia, Ghana, where these are countries that have been able to generate a lot of carbon credits. We know our problem. We are not big emitters, but we are severely damaged by the consequences of global warming. We've got air contamination, water contamination. The roots of that might be our own, burning stubble, but then you have temperature inversion, the air gets trapped, and the smog then lasts months and is with much greater intensity. Yes, we can do a lot to curb sewage, industrial waste, agricultural water runoff, but then the floods turn up and spread them over thousands of acres. And both these things, air and water, cause long-term ailments for adults and are a significant cause in the stunting that a large percentage of our children undergo. So we have to address these issues anyway. And then, in terms of our capacity to replace fossils with renewables, according to the World Bank, on 0.07% of our land, we could provide electricity for the whole country. We've got strong wind systems in the south, on the coast in Sindh and in parts of Balochistan. So wind is a very viable area for expansion. Of course, hydro has always been there and is being developed, and is also being developed with a lot of small, mini, and micro power generations in the valleys and the hills in the north. Now, the implications. What are the implications for the cost of the whole thing? Now, this is what the finance minister and anyone who went to Baku will have seen this. I don't know if this is at all clear. Yeah, can you expand the screen, please? Well, their assessment, the independent expert group that works for the UN FCCC and provides estimates for what's going to be needed in the next 5 years. The planning period is 5 years, but in this case, we're talking about 1930, this collective target of cutting back by 50% by 2030. In their estimate, we're going to need 6.5 trillion. 6.5 trillion, that's what we have to be spending a year by 2030. And and from 2024, wherever we are, we have to grow consecutively to reach that number. And they present this as a fait accompli, and if it doesn't happen, they think their prognosis is very depressing. And then the expenditure goes on; it keeps rising. But if you look at the breakdown, if you look at the boxes, the figure in brackets, climate and nature. So it's the estimate is 2.6 trillion for developed countries, 2.4 trillion for emerging markets, and 1.5 for China. We don't have to worry about China; they're well on their way, and they're spending whatever is needed. The developed countries probably will. So the challenge really then comes down to the 2.4 trillion that the emerging markets are meant to produce. Now, the figure in brackets under the main head is the amount by which we have to increase spending from 2024. So 2.4 trillion by 2030 and 1.9 trillion now. So we've got to go up. Not by so we're spending 500 trillion now, and we have to go up by 1.9 trillion to reach 2.4 trillion, which is the target for 2030. And then they break that into domestic and external. 1.4 domestic, 1 trillion external. Now, if you look at the sources of domestic finance and the sources of external finance, there are many things we could consider in this, but I just want to point out one sole reality, which is the expectation that private finance, not public finance, is going to pull the cart hereon. Because you see, their estimate for how much private finance is to increase in the next 5 years compared to what it is today, it's 15 to 18 times in external finance and 5 to 7 times in money raised domestically. So this private finance is external private finance. Actually, this is not an idle hope, because if you look at what's happening, the imposition of emission ceilings in the West have led a lot of companies to look for ways to cut emission and to trade, because countries establish caps for how much particular companies can emit, and if they over it, they either pay a penalty or they go and buy a credit from someone who is under the cap. So that's the carbon trading market. That compliance trading market is today about $800 billion. So, and that is all private activity. So it is growing very fast. This is the compliance market. There's something called the voluntary trading market, which is not a regulated market, but it's when people who seek to buy carbon credits to offset their own excess, when they go to outside their own countries. There's a large part of the world covered by these requirements now. All of EU has these requirements. Canada, China, Japan, New Zealand, and more parts of America, California, 11 northeastern American states, all have this system of caps and trading. This same thing is being adopted actually increasingly. Well, I think you see, this is the figure I was referring to, 15 to 18 for private finance, and then 5 to 7 in the national, for the national targets. Countries like China and India, among the emerging markets, already have domestic voluntary trading markets, and there are 5 others in Asia that are setting them up in the course of this year. So they will have domestic, they will generate domestic credits, trade domestic credits, send domestic credits as a marketplace. So there's Malaysia, Vietnam, India that is coming on in the course of this year and the next year in the trading market. So, that the big hope for this sharp jump in private credits is they're not really smoking pot. This is an impulse. It's dynamism that is developing, and we have to that's what I said to begin with, we have to latch onto it. Why is the corporate sector now in this position, and why are they a more attractive source than they've been? Well, first of all, the private sector has got used to the exercise. The first is these caps that they face. The second part is reduced, more efficient, cheaper, and more easily available technology, which is bringing, the cost of compliance down. Then this ESG, that companies have been economic, social, environmental, social, and governance goals that the corporate sector has been living with for more than a decade now, everywhere. Environment is a big part of that, so companies already have been setting aside things for this use. Where Pakistan misses out is to be able to latch on to one of the United Nations agencies, or really to be able to go to any international market to sell your credits, where you're producing savings that you can package and sell. You need a process of accreditation, and this is where we've got at the moment only 2 accredited entities in Pakistan, JS Bank and NRSP. We need our major banks. We need our major banks accredited, actually. And if these major banks, just off the cuff, if these major banks adopt 5 or 6 large companies, then the banks and these companies working as syndicates, the companies will bring in their supply chain behind them, so that you'd go deep down into the decarbonization process. I mean, that is something that that is the only way I can think we can accelerate the entry of the private sector. Now, critically, with this amount of money that's going to be spent, we really have to worry about how many countries will have an internal implementation structure that can meet the expense required. I mean, you have to have the projects. And how many, and the projects have to be projects such as will withstand heavy international standards of verification and validation. And the two major agencies, Vera and Gold Standard, take a long time today. And that's why our banks say that they're hesitant to apply. But they also have very tough requirements on whoever applies. They come and examine them to make the simple judgment, are you fit to apply? But this is what's got to change. So the second thing is, can we generate projects fast enough? The second thing is, what is the status of the supply chains of the equipment and the machinery that is needed for the climate effort? Panels, batteries, transformers, minerals, lithium, copper, rare earth. Are they going to be available and functional in sufficient capacity to be able to meet the 6.4 trillion that is going to be spent? There are already problems. There's a problem with the wind project in England that's falling 5 years behind because the transformers that are coming from China, there's just a huge backlog of orders. So the planning for this has to be done, quite keeping these things in mind. So now Pakistan's base at Baku, the base shown is 495 million tons of emission. Let's say 500 million tons. We said that business as usual, we'd get to 1.6 by 2030. But we said we would we wouldn't grow to 1.6, we'd grow to 800 million tons. So in other words, just increasing by 300 and reducing 800 million tons of emissions. And I think we all know the projects that Pakistan has, the priority projects for this renewable cutting down coal, everything to do with the Indus Basin, the nature-based credits. Our mangroves have done very well. I think the Sindh government's generated $50 million for the period up to 22, which they received in 23. But now they've applied for the next section, for the 23-24 section that they ought to approve this year. And it's interesting in pricing these credits, because mangroves have besides absorbing greenhouse gases, besides that, they provide flood barriers, they provide biodiversity, shrimp, crabs, that the population revives, which provides livelihood. Those credits are more expensive. So we commonly credits these days in Europe are about $5 a ton. But we generated $13 for our mangroves, and the Sindh government now expects to generate $20 for the block that's being approved now. We said our need was going to be 348. That's the figure the World Bank said we'd need between 2023 and 2030. So in 2025, I don't think we've received too much of that 348. For these things that I've mentioned, we have said that we need external finance of 101. This is our position at Baku. So between 101 of external finance that we expect to get, and between the 350, which may be 320, there's still over $200 billion that we have to raise. Now, to give you an idea, I mean, just for perspective, our annual development plan for 24 was 1.4 trillion rupees, which is $5 billion. So an amount of about $40 billion a year, if it's 200 that we have to raise, we really have to certainly go flat out with our own resources, but we have to go abroad extensively. and that we do have some early opportunities. The World Bank again estimates that if we repurpose our current subsidies that we give to water, energy, and agriculture, and we introduce carbon pricing, which is a cost for emissions, which then you can also trade if there are people below the cap set for that industry. If we introduce a cap if we introduce carbon pricing between these two steps, the repurposing of domestic current subsidies and the introduction of carbon pricing would earn us about $10 billion a year. Well, we've talked about PPP, we've talked about green bonds, and of course we'll explore all bilateral possibilities. But then, as I said, if we're going to have a sustainable process going forward, we need to generate projects, and we need to build an operational mechanism for identifying and generating projects, a taxonomy that will identify eligible sectors by different adaptation and mitigation initiatives, provide underlying principles for appraising each, scan them, or sort of toughen them up, knowing that the standards that are going to be used by validation, by VERI and the United Nations own. The most recent Article 6.4 description for what is going to be considered valid for selling as a carbon credit. They have 11 criteria, and a lot of that criteria focuses on, besides emission, on social, other environmental, on human rights, and on anti-corruption rules. So they are very insistent that climate policies must prioritize equitable access to the benefits of mitigation, so that national climate goals do not come at the cost of human development, which is, I think, something that Justice Manzoor Ali Shah was emphasizing, and it's absolutely valid comment. These community-related initiatives, as I said, Ghana, Vietnam, India, etc. In rice planting, which is the way we plant rice, the normal flood irrigation system for planting rice produces a lot of methane. And methane is a big our agri is 40%, our agri emissions are 40% of our total emissions. And a lot of that is methane. So by changing how you plant rice from standing water, which gives rise to bacteria, which then gives rise to noxious gases, if you change how you plant rice, in Ghana, they've been able to get a fair amount, raise a fair amount in credits from outside. So this voluntary carbon market, supported by banks, leading groups of companies, I'm just suggesting banks, there's a better way, and there must be, we should pursue, but it's got to be groups of entities in the private sector sort of hunting in packs for opportunities. And they can be assigned sectors, they can be assigned regions, they can be assigned subjects for what is their area, or they can just compete with each other. But we have to think of mobilizing that. Otherwise, frankly, we'll stay in the situation where we're going looking for grants and not generating stuff for a market that is increasing rapidly. There's a market that has demand, and we need to supply. So compliance credits, which is the compulsory credits, were 800 billion last year. Voluntary credits internationally were only 3 billion last year. But according to estimates, by 2030, they expect the voluntary carbon markets to be somewhere between 30 billion, and the high estimate is by Barclays, 250 billion. Whatever the number is, it's a huge number, and other developing countries, emerging markets, are beginning to participate in it. So a strategy to get ready with projects that are eligible, a strategy to learn how to use this accreditation mechanism, how to cluster companies so that they can work together, and then eventually how to get these, if we're producing enough projects, then these agencies like Berry and Gold Standard, the international certifying agencies, may want to have offices here, will want to have offices here, or will appoint local consultants here, so that whole process of closing the deal will become much shorter. Lastly, there's a big stress on agrovoltaic these days, which is introducing solar in particular wherever we can in agriculture. And this is not just tube wells. It's also for cold storage, which for us is a very, very big need. And diverse other uses, both wind but agrovoltaics, and it's really related to panels and power generated by panels. So we have a lot of very challenging scenario, but I think our situation is replete with possibilities, given our natural attributes and our human attributes. So I wish everyone the best of luck, and thank you very much. I was honored to have been asked to be with you today. Thank you.